Thank you guys for staying around for the panel. I know it's been a long day, but it's been great, I think, so far hearing the really deep conversations about recruiting. I think sometimes you come to these and you hear, you should try reporting. You're like, I tried that, thank you. But for this today, we've really got deep into specifics around what are you thinking about reporting on, how do you be a real strategic business partner. So we hope to continue some of those deep discussions in this panel. So the panel focus is on early stage, being the first recruiter or being the first talent hire, and how do you navigate both scaling your team, scaling yourself, as well as how do you leverage that experience for your career growth. And I have an amazing panel here who I'll introduce, and then we'll jump right into questions. So first, I want to introduce Leah, the amazing Leah. Leah has over nearly a decade of experience now at Help Scout, now VP of People. I think you've had a long kind of trajectory there, so that'll be amazing to hear about as well. But she's really passionate about scaling teams with empathy, intention, and just the right amount of process, which is great. And you can find her living in Philly with her wife and daughter. And both of which have strong opinions, strongly held.
It's true.
That's awesome. Thank you, Leah. And now Anisha Thomas. Anisha is the head of people at Inscribe, where she focuses on building a people-first culture that helps a team thrive and grow. She's passionate about creating high-performing teams, inclusive environments, and where people feel supported and empowered. Outside of work, you can find her chasing her toddler in Golden Doodle.
Yeah.
And Heather, thank you for coming, Heather Barr. Heather started her career at Outward Bound in experiential outdoor education before transitioning into research at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. After moving to San Francisco, you found your way into startups, which is amazing, both at Samsara and then Modern Treasury. And now you are VP of People at Modern Treasury, where she oversees recruiting, HR, workplace, operations, and IT. So pretty much everything. So Heather loves Maine, the beach, lobster, boats, and spending time with her friends, family, and her dog, Bonnie. So I think one thing we've learned is get a dog. That's probably the first thing you should do as the first talent hire. But no, we're going to get into the panel now and start the questions. I joked that I would go off script and ask 100 men or one gorilla to the whole panel, but I think there was consensus that the gorilla would destroy 100 men. I think that was the consensus. So we're going to jump right into other questions. And the first one being, when you're first starting off as a recruiter in the seat at early stage startup, there's 100 opinions about what you should start doing. Everyone has opinions about recruiting and what you should do first. So my first question is to Leah. Can you kind of discuss at Help Scout maybe, how did you figure out how do you build trust with that founding team, and then also how to prioritize what to do first?
Yes. So when we met previously to discuss this, and I knew this question, I reached out to our first VP of engineering at that time, now almost 9 years ago, and I asked him, I was like, hey, how did I build trust with you? Do you remember? And he was a good sport, and he was like, oh yeah, I'll tell you. And I was like, thank you. It's hard to remember these days.
Long time.
Yeah, but he was, I really appreciated that he was like, you know what? You were new to this, and I had never recruited before, but I was very, willing to learn and get curious. And he's like, you did what you said you would do, and you followed up, and you didn't drop the ball, and that really meant a lot to me. And then it built trust. And Help Scout's been remote since we started in 2011, so this was, trying to build trust in a remote environment even more. I think you really have to do what you say you're going to do. And then from there, it was just trying to figure out, okay, what do we do next? All right, we have to start hiring people. And the tools back then, all 9 years ago, sounds like a long time ago, but basically we were like, all right, let's maybe create a spreadsheet, and I'll throw LinkedIn profiles in there, and you leave comments and tell me what you think, and we'll go back and forth. And he was like, okay, I can do that. And so it was a lot of meeting hiring managers then, where they were at. And then you just have to, build your own proof, right? So once you start aligning on the profiles and then starting to bring in good candidates, he was like, oh, you're pretty good at this. I really love the people I'm talking to. It starts to build your own credibility. And it just kind of snowballs from there. And so, it was nice to have that trip down memory lane
That's
with
awesome.
him.
Do you remember if there was a moment where you knew you had their trust?
Yeah, I think once the first person I, sourced and got into the process, and then we sent her an offer letter and she signed and everyone was pumped. They were like, oh, nice job, Leia.
So you got it.
And I was like,
you can do this. Yeah.
I did that. Let's do that again. That was
do that
fun.
again.
And,
Awesome.
And then, when you actually are making that impact, people are like, oh yeah, I want to work with her. Give her my roles.
Awesome. So the results kind of lead to
Yeah.
that. Awesome. Now jumping to Heather. And wanted your take on that question, both at Samsara and then Modern Treasury. Were there differences in how you built out or kind of started out within those two companies?
Yeah, definitely. So Samsara, when I joined, it was about 100 people. So it already had a lot of the process in place and a pretty strong recruiting team already. So we really focused on hiring people who were able to scale quickly. And a lot of the recruiters that we brought in actually had agency experience. They had never been in-house. It was a pretty intense environment. I think a couple of people here might have been on the recruiting team at Samsara at the time. So it was an exciting time to be there. And to build trust, it was really all about moving fast and getting results quickly. So if that was something you were able to do, you had trust from the hiring managers pretty immediately. At Modern Treasury, it was a little different. It was 20 people. I was the first head of talent, but really just the first recruiter ever at that company. And our CTO is still recruiting. So the trust that I built with him, it was really when I made my first hire within the first 2 weeks. And I also had to pick out our applicant tracking system, and I got that implemented within 3 weeks, which shout out to Ashby for that. I remember that conversation with Benji. I was like, well, I'll give you guys a try. There's nothing better on the market, so you can't be that bad. So anyway, it was an interesting experience to build trust, for both companies.
So a little bit of results and a little bit of all right, let's get some systems in place.
You just got to make things happen fast,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And now bringing Anisha into the conversation, can you talk through, you've been now part of teams that have gone up and down in terms of team size, and I'm sure everyone has experienced that of just wild turns in headcount. But can you discuss how you think about your team and how you build out knowing that that might happen or having experienced that?
Yeah, definitely. So at Inscribe, I've seen the ups and downs. I was the first talent hire. I'm employee 18, which I'm really proud of, because they brought on people really early to build the foundations. But I was purely an operator at that time. And then I started to grow the team. I focused more on the strategic side of things while my team handled the day-to-day operations. But then during the tough times and going back to being a team of one, I'm doing strategy and being hands-on, and that is challenging, but also super rewarding. I actually get to connect the dots. I actually get to make the strategic decisions, but I also get to implement it. And so I recommend for any leader to always be hands-on in some shape or form, regardless of the size and stage your company is at.
Yeah. Because that would have been made harder if you hadn't stayed sharp on the recruiting side. If you had to kind of go back down and not have the experience, I guess, as being hands-on.
Exactly.
That's awesome. One round robin question I'll ask is, if you had to go back, your first recruiter in seat, your first year, you get one hire on the team. What role would you hire? And anyone can answer. For your team, for the internal talent team.
Yeah, I know, for sure. It would be an RC/sourcer, so a hybrid. Someone who can build top of funnel and keep the pipeline going and make sure that there's a really clean process. I think that also sets you up for success, and that hopefully you can promote them internally, and you have a recruiter. It's great.
That's a good answer. You cheated on the hybrid, but I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
You know.
Anyone else?
I'd probably go with rec ops, assuming I'm the full-on recruiter and I've got some solutions in place and tech stack in place to help me with that, and hiring managers to depend on. But one, because it's not my strong suit,
Sure.
But it's hard to scale and do anything if you have messy data.
Yeah. I like that answer that you mentioned, just knowing your own skill set, because a lot of times I don't think there's a right answer to that question, especially if you might have weaknesses in a certain area, whether that be branding or other pieces that you need to supplement, or the tech side or the data side, who knows? So being able to know your own, like being real about your own strengths and weaknesses and doing that analysis, I think is so important first. And we often skip that into thinking about the company and not like, okay, what would actually help myself? But Leah, same question.
Another recruiter.
Yeah.
Just more bandwidth.
Yeah. So like a full cycle recruiter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not bad either. I was gonna say recruiting coordinator. I think something about that experience of people that come on and the scheduling that happens. I also know my weak points, and so
Yeah, the same.
like having someone that can make sure things are smooth and running. And then the other one I thought about was just employer branding, and I think as AI replaces a lot of the more like administrative stuff, that there's going to be a more important piece of what we do, which is getting out there and communicating around brand and who we are. And you're even seeing that with more personal employer, like recruiters becoming their own brand. And I think that will be important as we move forward in the next few years, because I don't know if AI can necessarily replace that right now. Okay, moving on to this is a good one. Navigating your own career growth within this, right? Because you're making a pretty big risk in joining our early stage company. It can go right, it can go wrong, but you're going to get an experience, that's for sure, one way or another. So the question is really like, success in the role is really determined by picking the right company at the right time. So when you were looking for that, maybe we go to Anisha first, what were the ingredients you looked for when you were thinking about what company to join?
Yeah, so I was at Intercom prior to Inscribe, and I was actually really happy there. And I wasn't looking, and it wasn't until Ronan, our CEO and co-founder of Inscribe, reached out to me about this head of people role. And I was debating, I was like, should I explore this opportunity or not? And it was my dad who actually recommended to do a SWOT analysis to compare and contrast the opportunities.
Such a dad thing.
I know. Yeah, and I actually recommend it. It really helps. And that's how I came to my decision. So after I reflected on the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of both the roles and companies, I landed on, I should move to Inscribe. One, because I get to be a part of the leadership team and close to the business, which is something I didn't have at Intercom. And I also love working with Irish founders. I got that at Intercom, but I get to work more directly with them at Inscribe. There's just a natural kind of low ego, relationship-focused culture, and you can actually already see that and see that shine through in our day-to-day way of working and our values.
That's awesome. I like how you had like your Irish founder as like one of your criteria for your future jobs. Okay, you're gonna try to keep that going. That's awesome. Going to Heather, maybe you can share your experience with Samsara, Modern Treasury, and how you made that choice between those companies.
Yeah, so there was actually a caveat there. I did go somewhere in between Samsara and Modern Treasury, and I learned a lot from that experience. I actually think it was really valuable for me to go to a company that wasn't a great fit. I think you can learn a lot in the things that you don't want in a company. And so don't be afraid to make a move, because you're going to learn from it and you're going to end up somewhere that really values you and where you really enjoy the founders and the leadership style. So with that said, Samsara was high growth. I learned a lot. I scaled quite a bit there. And I really wanted to go somewhere and build. When I met Dimitri, the CEO, I knew that his values really aligned with my own. And where my strengths were is really what they needed at the time. So I knew that I could bring really quick results. So that's why I joined.
That's awesome. I don't think I prepped you for this question, but I'm going to ask anyway. But was there a question or set of questions you asked during the process where you knew, like, or that you found the most helpful, I guess?
For me, it was really figuring out what the next couple of months looked like for them. Like truly, like get into the details, like the day-to-day. Who's doing the recruiting right now? Oh, your CTO? Okay. Do you have an ATS? No? All right, that's something I'm going to be doing. Really think through practically what it's going to look like for you on your day-to-day. I was scheduling my first day on the job. I was calling people. I was looking at spreadsheets where they were tracking candidates. I mean, you're going to go back to getting in the weeds and rolling up your sleeves, and you have to be okay with that. You really can't have an ego when you go into a role as head of talent, but you're really doing everything, first recruiter. It's just really time to hustle. So yeah, ask the detailed questions. It matters a lot.
Yeah, I think sometimes in the process you're trying to sell yourself, right? And so you're trying to get the role, but there's a time where you have to say, okay, like let me qualify this opportunity for myself, and that means like asking like tough questions and kind of being the thorn a little bit sometimes when you're like asking about details.
Totally. And there were some red flags on the first, my transitional company that I ignored, and I learned a lot from that too. So yeah, definitely keep that in mind.
All right, so go up to Heather afterwards and ask her about those red flags. And won't name the company, but we'll see. Leia, maybe, so you've had experience now within a company and kind of growing from, I think office manager into VP of people. So that story alone, that could be a whole session. That should probably be the next in Ashby too. But can you just talk through, I know when we were talking, you mentioned choosing the company and not the role. So can you just kind of talk through that?
Absolutely. I was, at the time, almost 10 years ago, working in higher ed and feeling quite disillusioned. It's, if anyone has experience in other industries like education, it's just a different world. And at the time, it was just a lot of bureaucracy. I remember what really set me over the edge was there was a committee on committees, and I was just like, what are we doing here? What am I doing here? That isn't right. And so it led me to sort of work backwards, and I started just trying to Google company culture and wanting to understand who else was doing this differently. And I can't remember exactly the blog post, but Help Scout has a really robust company blog, and I stumbled upon it, reading about how they were thinking about company culture already at like 20 people, and they were fully remote. And again, this was 2015, and it just sort of blew my mind, and I was like, I want to work there. And so then it began my campaign to convince them that I was the person they wanted to hire. True story, I actually applied for a customer support job first, promptly disqualified, and that's for the best. And then, a couple months later, like a people ops generalist / office manager came up, and I was like, yes, I can convince them to do that. And we did have a small Boston office at the time, so I know, we are and still, fully remote. And I think, I think you were saying this too, it's like, you have to remove your ego. Like at the time in education, I had like 2 master's degrees, blah, blah, blah. And, to be like, okay, I'm kind of starting over, but like, I want to work here and let's do this. And so it all worked out. They took a chance on me, and now they're stuck with me for at least another couple of years. I think. It's been a wild ride.
That's awesome. How did, in that process, you mentioned going up for a role and then being not a fit. Like, how did you navigate staying in play during that time, and not just like dismissing it completely?
It's a good question. I just was like, I really want this. I was pretty determined, and I just stayed close, and I was subscribed to the blog. I kept up to date, and then I was like, oh. Now they're hiring for this. Yeah. This is the one. And it was more transferable, my skills coming from education and being a teacher to, people and culture. There's a ton of overlap, and I think some of the best, recruiters too come from non-traditional backgrounds.
Absolutely.
And, I was able to trick them.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they're glad you tricked them because now you're a VP of people. So that's really, I think, a great point around just like sometimes the stick with it attitude can actually be a good signal for them on your excitement around the company. I've definitely taken bets on people that were just 100%. more excited about the opportunity. So that's awesome. Now moving a little bit to as the company scales, you're starting to grow. Culture is starting to become a thing. At the beginning, I think culture is like this amorphous thing, but then it starts to be a real kind of area where you want to, where companies want to get better at. And oftentimes, you as the head of talent or the talent person you're kind of the culture carrier in a way, and you're shaping the culture with each hire. So you're kind of de facto involved in this process. But maybe Heather, if you can talk through your experience building out culture across offices. I know you've done that even internationally and having to navigate that, which is probably a big thing as well. But anything that you implemented early on that still sticks around, and any general advice on like culture as you build and you grow?
Yeah, Samsara did scale quite a bit when I was there. We opened a couple of offices, and I think one of the tricky parts was how do you keep the culture consistent across different departments and offices, right? So we had a London office, we had an Atlanta office. I think now they might have like 20 different offices at this point. And what we would do is we would send leadership there when we opened up the London office and the Atlanta office. So for me, it was more spending time in the office as we scaled up the team. I hired some of the first recruiters in the Atlanta office and made sure that a lot of the values and the culture of Samsara were, people are seeing it and living it and getting a feel for how you operate. And I think that's really important. I think, at Modern Treasury, we're a little bit smaller. We don't have a bunch of offices. We're just SF New York and remote. But one of the things that I'm thinking about now is as we have more people going into the office, I feel like during COVID, we didn't really prioritize leaders in office. We sort of were like, oh, great, you're in Indianapolis. Well, you're in like Indiana or whatever. Like, we'll hire you. And now it's really nice to be able to say to our head of CS, hey, can you pop into the New York office and check in? So I think as you start to think about culture, who do you want in those offices as culture carriers, and making sure that you think about that as you strategically plan.
Yeah, so kind of like injecting some existing culture
It's
in
hard
there.
to do. It's hard to keep consistent culture across offices, and I don't know if there's any one magic trick for that, but that's what we've tried to do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Anisha, same question. Building up culture early stages, would you change anything, do anything different from your experience, or?
Yeah, intentional in-person time is really important, as you were saying, Heather. But one thing I do different and earlier on is write everything down. Things move so quickly, especially also being remote. Usually norms, right? You pick it up just by being in person with each other, or maybe through Zoom here and there. But codifying norms and writing that down is really important. I remember that because I remember I showed up to a presentation and all my slides were different. And I realized my CEO had changed all the slides because he cares about presentation quality, and clearly I didn't live up to those standards. But it was happening to other people on the team too, so I was like, okay, this is something. We need to write this down and make this part of like our hiring process, and it actually became part of our values as well, and something that we carry throughout our way of working.
Gotcha. So like in terms of like writing slides and being able to create them, and that became part of your, assessment of people as they came on, because it was so valuable to the leadership team.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Leah, any big culture mistakes? This is where you have to get juicy here.
Right?
We need the good stuff.
Mistakes?
So, any big culture
it's
mistakes?
Been perfect for 10 years. No mishires.
Oh, really?
Yes. Let's see. So it was around 2021, 2022, boom times. We just raised Series B. We also happened to have a few leadership openings. And we thought, we're going to really scale, we're going to get big. And the whole mantra became, we want to hire people who have seen the movie before. And I was just like, oh my God. And our CEO kept saying it. It was in like the job descriptions. And I was like, if I have $1 for every time someone says, seen the movie before, I could buy a lot of movies. But we were like, okay, let's go do this. And, interviewed a lot of folks at bigger companies, later stages, who had seemed successful there. And we were like, yes, that's what we want. And so we hired 3 folks like this. And spoiler alert, they all lasted about a year and a half. And it was just a huge lesson for us, I think, internally that, you can't just copy paste. What worked somewhere else might not work for you. really figure out what like makes your company unique. And in our case, I think we were like, oh, I think maybe we're a little weird, and we need to really understand that and then hire for that. And it also really led to, for us, writing down something we call the practitioner rule, where anyone in management or leadership has to still be very much an operator and know what great looks like and really be able to hold that bar of excellence and also then know how to hire other great people. And so that's really transformed, I think, since how we've operated, and we've had like a very consistent, stable leadership team since. And we also looked inward and also promoted from within, and that's also part of how I got to where I was too, because they were like, oh, yeah, she hasn't done this before, but who cares?
Yeah.
So I know about movies now.
But maybe getting people who know who may fit your movie that you're trying to create versus the movie that they've seen before.
Exactly.
So that's awesome.
Yep.
It's cool that you mentioned that, like that practice of hiring internally. Essentially, like your journey was, I guess, a result of the culture. Do you think that came from the founders and how they, their philosophy, or was that like a collective thing that shaped as the company grew?
Which part?
Like just in terms of promoting from within. And
Yes,
kind of,
that definitely came from the founders as a result of the lessons learned when we looked outward and it didn't work out.
Gotcha.
We
So
were
that
just like,
became about
yeah. Because we had like a lot of like mid-level and director folks who had been here at a long time, and we're like, oh, maybe there's something there. Let's continue to elevate and let's see what happens. And that was really successful.
Gotcha. Do you guys invest in like a lot of learning and development then? Is that
Yes, every single person on the leadership team has an executive coach.
really?
But it's been great, and I think someone earlier talked about it, but if you have money or budget for L&D to get a coach, whew,
Worth it. Yeah,
very much.
that's awesome. Any other culture things or culture interviews that any of your companies do specifically, or is it kind of integrated into the interview process?
Let's see. We are pretty strategic about how we interview. We really try to eliminate bias. I think one of the things that we did for a really long time was our CEO would interview everybody. I'm sure you probably have had this happen to you. It was great for a while. I think it definitely helps scale the culture, and then at some point it doesn't work anymore. So we're just really focused on building a strong interview process and making sure that we are also looking at the little details too. How do they treat people through the process? How do they interact with everybody? That's really important. How prepared are they? Things like that matter. And so it's all of those little cues that you can pick up on that I think really help in terms of the culture.
Yeah, I think just making sure to like inform the team around like, hey, if you notice things like that, like
Flag
put that
it,
in
say
there.
something.
Yeah, like that's important.
And that's
like,
where the debriefs come in, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that's so
yeah,
helpful.
yeah,
If our RC has a
Yeah.
experience that's not positive, that matters. And
Yeah.
so we want to hear about that. So all of that adds up.
Yeah, so important. I think, for signals other than the official interviews, like the recruiter, scheduling the interviews and things like that, or even their response and how they kind of respond afterwards. I remember during one of my processes, we started to give feedback to candidates between interviews, and actually a lot of the signal is like not like the exact feedback that we gave, but like how did they respond to that?
Yeah, that would be
it's like, did they take that and like become defensive about it and like drop out? Did they follow through and learn the next time and kind of brought that became a straight? Did they show that skill set in the next interview? Like that was a good signal too. So
That's a great idea.
Yeah, awesome. Talking about headcount and just that being the challenge, I think for a lot of teams, it's stay lean, right? Increase impact. That means expectations are higher for each individual. But just thinking about headcount planning today has to be so hard given also the advancement in AI. Not only how our teams use AI, but how are functions changing their jobs based on the innovations in technology. So like, will engineering look the same in a year from now that it does today? Probably not, right? So how do you go about, and maybe Leah first, just thinking about having these conversations with each individual function given this rapid change in AI?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about all of you, but it's very weird to be riding like a current wave of some revolutionary technology.
Yeah.
And there's no playbook to just copy paste. So I think the conversations we're having is just how do we, roll out AI internally, and how do we do it strategically, and what are each team doing? And so right now it feels very much like just a little too Wild West. So we're trying to rein that in. And our last people team meeting, we just was really spent like, I want to know, how are all of you using AI? And let's write it down, and then I'm going to go back and share with our leadership team, and I want every other team to do it. And then we should all keep it in our shared knowledge base internally, so everyone knows, like, okay, how's engineering using AI? How's the product team using AI? Let's start with that, and just understand it instead of these sort of like siloed kind of one-off moments. But and I think the other thing too, now it's like, all right, if someone moves on and it's not an automatic backfill, it's like, okay, well, maybe can we get by using AI, or a person with AI doing something differently than we had before? And yeah, so that one's unfolding as we speak.
Yeah, these are like brand new conversations we're having about headcount, right? Like it's usually, all right, backfills, another person. Now you're like, well, is this a person? And then how do you onboard new tools and technology where people might feel threatened by it? That's a whole big thing there. Maybe Heather, same question for you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of similar points to Leia. I think if we were to add another member to the recruiting team, I'd first have to go and look and say, how do we really need this, or can we use AI to do a lot of the work? I mean, Ashby has already built in so much AI, and it really has saved a bunch of time with scheduling, sourcing, all of that. So I do think that optimization is really important. I think you get to a point where you do need to make another hire, no matter what. And so that's where that headcount conversation is changing.
Yeah.
Also, on other departments, we have a pretty big engineering team, but now, in the management meetings, a backfill is not a guarantee. We're looking around saying, okay, we have all of these AI tools that Eng is leveraging. Let's get them ramped on that and give it a couple weeks and see if we need to do another, backfill. So it's changing, and we just have to be really flexible.
Yeah, and kind of, I would say, like, even be proactive about thinking about it, because we know our leaders are thinking about it. They're like, what can we replace with this? Are there areas at least that we can become more efficient or empowered? And so I think taking it into your own hands to be curious about it is, I think it's been mentioned time and time again today, of just experimentation, using things, and but just coming out with a POV even before the business asks, I think is really important, because then you can kind of drive the conversation versus being on your back foot, like, oh yeah, I guess we should be using this. So that's a great point there. Anisha, your company creates AI agents, so I'm assuming this is just all top of mind for you, but
totally, yeah, definitely. We just don't want there to be a disconnect between what we're selling and building and how we operate internally. It's super important for us to be AI enabled. And so, of course, I'm like looking at my own tech stack and AI solutions, but also being brought into conversations with other org leaders, right, for increasing productivity and development cycles with our engineering team, and same with go-to-market and AI SDR and implementing that. And I think it's also really knowing what are the use cases where AI actually will be valuable, because it's not always amazing, and really knowing when we actually do need to go out and hire. So that's why I'm being brought into these conversations, right? It does impact headcount at the end of the day.
Yeah. And, I think the argument is, does it replace people? I mean, the reality is teams will be leaner, most likely, and that means like people will have to leverage this. My vision and what I think is that every recruiter, whether you're a smaller company or a larger company, you'll essentially be a mini recruiting practice. You might have sourcing bots that go out for you and do things, or screen candidates for you. And so just being, allowing us to enable people, I think would supercharge the team. But we're one last round robin question. We're in 2030, so I'm transferring us and zooming us forward to 2030. What parts of the process are still human?
I mean, I think all of the candidate interaction still will be human. I don't know about all of you, but I don't want to be hired by a bot or an agent. I would like to still communicate with a human and get excited about people that I will be working with, and so. We'll rewind 10 years from now and
we're gonna record this and play it back.
And I'll be like, oh, what was I talking about? But we'll see. I like human connection.
Awesome.
Yeah, plus one, the relationship building side of things. I really do want to talk to candidates about culture, team dynamics, really see, is this going to be a fit or not? And so AI is great for, the sourcing and other aspects, but I like talking to humans.
Yeah, I mean, plus two. I think a lot of the senior recruiting roles, so like executive directors, those higher level roles for sure are still going to be very high touch. I think that maybe, more evergreen recs that you have open all the time, those are probably going to be more automated, at least the initial stages of that. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think some of that recruiter phone screen can be really monotonous if you have to do 10 phone screens a day and say the same thing, la 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 la. Yeah. I think we've all been there. So I'm actually excited to see that change. I was actually talking to someone the other day. He was like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, "I'm a recruiter." He's like, "Oh, AI is coming for you." And I'm like, "Oh, geez, And I really don't think that's true. I think we're all just going to adapt and change. But I think it's going to be interesting. One thing I would really like to see is I would like to not have to use LinkedIn Recruiter by 2030. I know that's maybe a hot take, but I'm standing by. I think we've spent so much money on LinkedIn Recruiter. I think maybe over $75,000 a year right now, and it's just wild. So I'm really hopeful that all these AI tools are going to figure out a way to change the game, maybe make them move a little faster.
All right, we'll see. Shots. Shots taken.
Shots fired.
All right. Thank you guys. I think that's good. Yeah, panel. Yeah. That's all said. Thank you guys for this panel. I think it's great to get insights into it. What I've heard is early, focus on results, build real partnerships with the founding team. And then as you navigate your career, I think it's just about, how do you scale your team, scale yourself, leverage these tools. So hopefully you all got some gems out of this. And thank you guys. Thank you to panelists.
Awesome. Thanks, Reggie. Thanks, everyone.